You never think it's going to be you. You never think your whole life can pivot on something as simple as a piece of silk, but mine did. One dress, one question, and everything I thought was stable and safe just fractured. Before I tell you what happened, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because you are not going to believe this. My husband was out for the afternoon, and the house was so quiet it felt heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the faint scraping from the study, where his older brother, Liam, was fixing a shelf. Liam. He's always been there, this quiet, steady presence in the background of my marriage. Polite, respectful, distant. But that day, I felt so incredibly invisible. And on a whim, I pulled out the new dress I'd been saving. It was emerald silk, cool and heavy against my skin, cut a little lower than I'd normally dare. My heart was pounding as I walked to the study. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to look casual. He turned from his work, and the moment his eyes met mine, the air just crackled. It wasn't the polite glance I was used to. This was different. He saw me. He really, truly saw me. And in that one look, the game had already begun. The next few days were a special kind of hell. A beautiful, agonizing, electrifying hell. We were all under the same roof, a twisted little family portrait. My husband, Mark, sat between us at the dinner table, rambling on about spreadsheets and quarterly reports, completely oblivious to the silent war being waged across his plate. He was the perfect buffer and the perfect blind spot. Liam and I were in our own world, one that existed in the inches of air between us. The air was so thick you could taste the static. I was hyper-aware of everything he did. The way his fork scraped against the porcelain, the way he'd rest his chin on his hand when he listened, the way his eyes, dark and knowing, would find mine whenever Mark looked down at his phone. One night, Mark asked me to pass the salt. As I reached for it, so did Liam. Our hands met over the shaker. It wasn't an accident. His fingers closed over mine, calloused and warm, and for a split second he just held them. A slow, deliberate pressure that sent a shockwave straight up my arm. My breath hitched. I looked up at him, my eyes wide, and he just gave me this tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. A secret smile just for me. Mark cleared his throat, still looking at his phone, and I snatched my hand back like I'd been burned. But the feeling lingered, the ghost of his skin on mine. I felt like a traitor. I felt more alive than I had in years. Later, I was curled up on the couch, pretending to read a book, and I felt his gaze on me from the armchair across the room. I didn't have to look up to know it. It was a physical weight, a warmth spreading across my skin. When I finally dared to meet his eyes, the look he gave me wasn't just desire. It was possession. It was a look that said, I see you, and you are mine. It all came to a head in the kitchen. It was late. Mark had gone up to bed early, complaining of a headache. The house was finally quiet, wrapped in that deep, humming silence of the suburbs at night. I was at the sink, rinsing a glass, my back to the room. I knew he was there before he even spoke. I could feel his presence, a shift in the atmosphere. You seem jumpy tonight, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated right through me. I didn't turn around. I just kept my eyes on the water swirling in the sink. Just tired, I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. I heard his footsteps, slow and deliberate on the tile, until he was standing right behind me. So close I could feel the heat coming off his body. I could smell the faint scent of his soap and something else, something uniquely him. I was just thinking, he murmured, his voice now right beside my ear. You haven't worn that green dress again. I froze, my hand tightening on the glass. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I haven't had an occasion, I managed to whisper, my voice shaky. He let out a soft, humorless laugh. He reached around me, his arm brushing against my back as he placed a hand on the counter beside mine, effectively trapping me. You don't need one, Alara. He said my name like it was a secret, a prayer. some things. They shouldn't be kept hidden away. The double meaning hung between us, thick and undeniable. He wasn't talking about the dress anymore. We both knew it. He leaned in closer, his lips almost brushing my temple. "Tell me to stop," he breathed, and it was a challenge, not a question. "Tell me you didn't feel it too." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was stand there, trembling, as his other hand came up to rest on my hip, his thumb stroking the fabric of my shirt in slow, hypnotic circles. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a confession. And in that moment, I knew I was lost. My mind was a blank, a roaring white noise of panic and something else, something dark and thrilling that I refused to name. The world had shrunk to the space between us, the cool porcelain of the sink at my back and the solid wall of his body in front of me. His thumb was still drawing lazy circles on my hip, a tiny point of contact that was setting my entire nervous system on fire. I had to say something. I had to push him away. My marriage, my life, the quiet, predictable future I had mapped out with his brother, it was all hanging by this one, fragile thread. My mouth opened, but only a shaky breath came out. "Liam," I whispered, and the name felt foreign, dangerous on my own tongue. "We can't. Mark is just... he's right upstairs." It was the last-ditch effort of a drowning woman, a desperate appeal to a reality that was rapidly dissolving around me. He didn't pull away. If anything, he leaned closer, his forehead coming to rest against my temple. I could feel the slight rasp of his evening stubble against my skin. "I know where he is, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low, hypnotic vibration against my skull. "Do you think I haven't thought about that every single day? Do you think I don't know how wrong this is?" His other hand left the counter and came up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheekbone with an agonizing gentleness. It wasn't the touch of a predator. It was the touch of a man who had been starving. "But I look at you, and I can't think about what's right. I just think about what is." He pulled back just enough for our eyes to meet, and what I saw in his gaze shattered my last defense. It was pure, unadulterated longing, a mirror of the secret, shameful ache in my own chest. The fight just drained out of me, replaced by a wave of intoxicating, terrifying surrender. My hands, which I'd been pressing into the counter behind me, lifted of their own accord and settled on his chest. I meant to push him away, I swear I did, but my fingers just curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding on. The air was electric, thick with the unsaid, with years of stolen glances and polite smiles that meant so much more. Outside, a soft rain began to fall, tapping against the kitchen window, creating a private world just for us. The sound muffled the silence of the house, giving us permission. "Tell me you don't feel this," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. "Look me in the eye and tell me you want me to walk away right now, and I will." It was my out. It was the one last chance to salvage everything, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't lie. Not now. Not when he was looking at me like I was the only thing he'd ever truly seen. Slowly, deliberately, he began to lower his head. I watched his lips approach mine, my own breath catching in my throat. Every rational thought screamed at me to turn away, to run, but my body was frozen, rooted to the spot, waiting. This was it, the point of no return. The line drawn in the sand was about to be washed away by a rising tide of want. And in the deafening silence of my own mind, as the rain pattered against the glass and my husband slept one floor above us, I knew I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let it happen. His lips met mine, and it wasn't a kiss. It was a collision, a desperate, frantic crash of two people who had been starving for years without even admitting they were hungry. All the polite smiles, the careful distances, the unspoken words, they all combusted in that one searing moment. There was no gentleness, no tentative exploration. It was pure, unadulterated need. his hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head back as his mouth claimed mine with a possessive force that left me breathless. I didn't push him away. I melted into him, my hands gripping his shirt like he was the only solid thing in a world that was tilting on its axis. We were a mess of tangled limbs and ragged breaths against the cold kitchen tile. It was a frantic, almost violent expression of everything we'd held back. His lips left mine to trail a burning path down my jaw, my neck, finding the sensitive skin just above the collar of my shirt. A strangled sound, half sob, half moan, escaped my throat. This was wrong. It was a catastrophic, life-altering betrayal of the man sleeping just one floor above us, his brother, my husband. But in that moment, fueled by years of silent longing and the intoxicating thrill of the forbidden, wrong was just a word. It had no power here. All that mattered was the solid feel of his body pressed against mine, the rough scrape of his stubble against my skin, the way he whispered my name against my pulse point like an incantation. He was erasing years of feeling invisible, of being the polite, smiling wife in the background. With every touch, he was saying, "I see you. I've always seen you." And I was letting him. I was surrendering to the beautiful, terrifying fire we had ignited, knowing, even as the flames licked higher, that we were both going to get burned. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was an inevitability, a force of nature we had foolishly tried to contain for far too long. The morning came like a physical blow. I woke up in my own bed, the sheets cold on my side where Mark had already gotten up. The first thing I felt wasn't the lingering warmth of Liam's touch, but a cold, heavy dread that settled deep in my stomach. The rain had stopped, and sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, streamed through the blinds, illuminating every dust mote in the air, making everything feel exposed. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. It was the silence of a crime scene. I could hear Mark whistling downstairs, the cheerful, oblivious sound grating on my raw nerves. I got dressed on autopilot, my hands shaking as I pulled on a pair of jeans and a simple sweater, clothes that felt like a costume, a lie. Walking into the kitchen was like walking onto a stage. Liam was already there, leaning against the counter, the same counter, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes met mine. The air crackled, thick with the memory of what had happened in that very spot just hours before. The world stopped. In his gaze, I saw it all. The fire, the regret, the shared secret that was now a living, breathing thing between us. Mark turned from the toaster, a slice of bread in his hand. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, smiling his easy, uncomplicated smile. "Coffee's fresh." He was so blissfully unaware, standing between us, a human shield against a war he didn't even know was being fought. I mumbled a good morning, my voice hoarse, and moved to get a mug. As I reached past Liam, our arms brushed. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure, panicked adrenaline. We both flinched back as if burned. Mark didn't notice. He just started talking about his plans for the day, his voice a drone in the background of the silent, screaming conversation Liam and I were having with our eyes. Every glance was a confession. Every shared silence was a conspiracy. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, now felt like a cage, and we were two guilty animals, trapped with the one person we had so carelessly, so completely betrayed. We tried to be good. For 2 whole days, we were ghosts in our own home, navigating around each other with a forced, painful politeness that was 1,000 times more intimate than any touch. We avoided eye contact. We spoke only in group settings, our words directed at Mark, but our awareness aimed solely at each other. It was a miserable, suffocating truce. I told myself it was a mistake, a single catastrophic lapse in judgment fueled by loneliness and a silk dress. I repeated it like a mantra. It meant nothing. It won't happen again. But it was a lie, and we both knew it. The house felt smaller, the air charged with the memory of that kiss. Every time we were in the same room, I could feel him, a magnetic pull I was physically fighting against. It was in the way my skin prickled when he walked past, the way my breath would catch when I heard his voice from the other room. The addiction was already in my veins, and I was going through a brutal withdrawal. The relapse happened in the garage. Mark had sent me to find an old box of photos, and of course, Liam offered to help, to reach the ones on the top shelf. The moment the door from the kitchen clicked shut behind us, plunging us into the dim, dusty light, the truce was over. The air changed. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching me, and the space between us became a humming, living thing. I tried to act normal, pointing to a stack of boxes. "I think it's that one up there," I said, my voice sounding thin and weak. He moved toward the shelf, and as he passed me, his hand brushed against my arm. It wasn't an accident. It was a question. I didn't pull away. I froze, my gaze locked on his back as he reached up. The fabric of his t-shirt stretched tight across his shoulders, and all I could think about was my hands on his chest, the feel of his heart beating against my palms. He pulled the box down and turned, trapping me between the shelf and his body. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and rough. He didn't have to say anything else. I saw the same desperate hunger in his eyes that I felt clawing at my own insides. "This is insane," I whispered, but I was already leaning in. The thrill of it was terrifying. Mark was just inside, probably making a sandwich, completely oblivious. We were hiding in plain sight, and the danger, the sheer recklessness of it was like a drug. That became our new normal. The house was our maze, and we were constantly seeking out its hidden corners. A hand on the small of my back as we passed in the hall. A shared glance over the top of Mark's head at dinner that held an entire conversation. His foot brushing against mine under the table, a secret signal that sent a jolt straight through me. We were living on the adrenaline of the near miss, the high of getting away with it. The guilt was there, a constant, dull ache in my chest, but the excitement was sharper, brighter, more powerful. I was becoming a stranger to myself, a creature of impulse and secrets, and I had never felt more horribly, beautifully alive. The game got bolder. The riskier it was, the more we craved it. We were no longer content with fleeting touches and stolen glances. We started taking chances, bigger and more reckless ones, fueled by a shared desperation. One afternoon, Mark was on a long conference call in his home office, his voice a muffled drone through the closed door. Liam found me in the living room, pretending to read. He sat on the arm of my chair, and for a moment, we just listened to the sound of my husband's voice down the hall. It was the soundtrack to our betrayal. "He'll be on that call for at least an hour," Liam murmured, his fingers tracing the collar of my shirt. My heart was a trapped bird, beating frantically against my ribs. "We shouldn't," I breathed, even as I tilted my head back, giving him access to my neck. It was madness. We were 20 feet away from him, but the proximity to danger was the whole point. His lips found mine, and the kiss was slow and deep, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of our first encounter. This was deliberate. This was a claim. We were learning each other, memorizing the taste and feel of a future we could never have. That's when we almost got caught. We heard the scrape of Mark's office chair on the hardwood floor. His voice, no longer muffled, said, "All right, talk to you all tomorrow." Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. We broke apart, a clumsy, frantic scramble. Liam shot to his feet and moved to the other side of the room, grabbing a magazine from the coffee table just as the office door opened. I smoothed my hair, my cheeks burning, my lips still swollen from his. Mark walked in, stretching his arms over his head. "Finally done," he sighed. Then he looked from me to Liam and back again, a small frown on his face. "What's going on? You two are acting weird." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind went completely blank. Liam, cool as ice, didn't miss a beat. "Just arguing about which movie to watch tonight," he said, flipping a page of the magazine without looking at it. "Ilara has terrible taste." Mark laughed, the sound making me want to vomit. He bought it. He actually bought it. But as he walked over and kissed my cheek, he paused. "Are you feeling okay? You're really flushed." I mumbled something about it being warm in the room, but I couldn't meet his eyes. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw it. A tiny, almost invisible smudge of my lipstick, the exact shade I was wearing that afternoon, right on the collar of Liam's gray t-shirt that he'd left on a chair. He'd been that close to walking right in front of Mark with the evidence of our kiss printed on his clothes. I stared at my reflection, at the wild look in my eyes, and I had no idea who I was anymore. I was a liar, a cheat. I was trapped in a labyrinth of my own making, and every wall I touched was Liam. I knew I should stop. I knew I had to end it before we destroyed everything. But the truth was, I didn't want to find the way out. I just wanted to get lost with him, deeper and deeper, until we couldn't be found at all. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a whisper. Mark started acting strangely. He'd take calls in the other room, closing the door softly behind him. He'd angle his laptop screen away from me when I walked by. My stomach was in a constant, tight knot of ice. He knew. He had to know. Every quiet moment was filled with the sound of my own frantic heartbeat, a drumbeat counting down to my execution. Liam and I exchanged panicked glances over the dinner table, the unspoken question hanging between us. Who's going to tell him? How much does he know? The guilt was a physical thing now, a poison ivy rash on my soul, itching and burning with every oblivious smile Mark gave me. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life, watching it from a distance as I waited for the whole thing to come crashing down. The paranoia was eating me alive. I'd jump every time a floorboard creaked, convinced it was Mark coming to confront us. I'd analyze every word he said, searching for a hidden meaning, a clue that he'd figured it all out. The house, our playground of secrets, had become a prison. Then one evening, he sat me down on the couch, his expression serious. This was it. My blood ran cold. I braced myself. He took my hands in his touch gentle and warm, and it felt like a brand. "Ilara," he started, and I swear my heart stopped. "I know I've been a little distant lately, and I'm sorry. I was just trying to keep it a secret." He paused, and I couldn't breathe. "I'm planning a surprise party for our anniversary, a big one. I've been calling your sister, your friends. I just want to do something really special, to celebrate you." He smiled, that wide, innocent, trusting smile that I used to love. "I just want everyone to see how incredible my wife is." And in that moment, the ice in my stomach didn't just break, it shattered. The shards ripping through me. It wasn't suspicion, it was love. It was a pure, simple gesture from a man who had no idea his entire world was a lie. The weight of it was crushing, suffocating. I wasn't just a cheat. I was a monster, destroying this kind, oblivious man from the inside out. I looked at him, at his hopeful, loving face, and I saw the devastation I was about to cause. I saw the ruins of our life. And I knew, with a certainty that was as sharp and painful as a knife wound, that this couldn't go on. The game was over. The bomb wasn't just going to go off. I was holding the detonator. That night, I found Liam in the study, the place where it had all begun. The air was thick with the ghosts of our recklessness. He was just standing there, staring out the window at the dark, manicured lawns of our neighborhood. He turned as I closed the door, and he must have seen the look on my face because the quiet confidence he always wore just crumbled. "He told you," I said, my voice a dead, flat thing. It wasn't a question. "About the party." Liam just nodded, his jaw tight. "What are we doing, Liam?" I finally asked, the words tearing out of me in a desperate, ragged whisper. "What in God's name are we actually doing?" He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of agitation I'd ever seen from him. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice rough. "I just know that when I'm not with you, I feel like I'm holding my breath." The confession, so simple and so devastating, hung between us. He trusts me. I choked out, the words tasting like ash. He loves me, and we're tearing him apart, and he doesn't even know it yet. I see his face, and I feel like I'm going to be sick. I took a step toward him, my body acting on its own. This has to stop. He met my advance, closing the space between us until we were inches apart. The familiar, dangerous electricity sparked to life. "Stop?" he repeated, his voice low and intense. Can you? Can you go back to the dinners and the polite smiles and pretend you don't feel this? Can you look at me every day for the rest of your life and pretend that kiss never happened? That we never happened? He was right. The poison was already in my veins. There was no going back. The life I had before him felt like a black and white movie, and he had dragged me into vibrant, terrifying color. To go back now would be a living death. "So what's the plan?" I demanded, my voice rising with a hysterical edge. "We just keep sneaking around his house until he walks in on us? We destroy him? We destroy everything?" His hands came up to cup my face, his touch both desperate and proprietary. "I don't have a plan, Alara," he breathed, his forehead pressing against mine. "All I have is this. All I have is you." And he kissed me. It wasn't like the other times. There was no thrill, no stolen excitement. This was a kiss of pure, unadulterated despair. It was a goodbye and a promise, a confession of love and an admission of guilt. It was the last deep breath before plunging into the abyss. We both knew, as our lips met in the suffocating silence of the house, that we couldn't stop. We were on a collision course with reality, and the impact was going to be catastrophic. The storm wasn't coming anymore. We were in the eye of it, and it was about to tear us all apart.